Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Was Sunday's budget historic as the Prime Minister has claimed? Does it have a central defining vision, or is it just a lot of detail? How effectively does it tackle the problems the economy faces, and how meaningful are its key focus areas? Those are some of the top issues I shall discuss today with one of India's foremost economists, former Chief Statistician and former country head of the International Growth Centre, Pronab Sen. Professor Sen, let me start with a simple question. Was Sunday's budget historic as the Prime Minister has claimed, or is that an exaggeration?
I don't recall any budget which hasn't been claimed as historic. So this is just a continuity. I would be shocked if a Prime Minister said that this was not a historic budget.
But is the claim justified?
No.
So this is not a historic budget?
No.
Does it have a central defining vision, or is it just a lot of detail?
No, it's a business as usual. So the broad sense once one gets out of the budget is we are in a sweet spot. Let's not derail it in any meaningful manner. Little tweaks here and there, those are called for. There are various groups in the country who should be mentioned for political purposes. It was more or less all of that.
So when you say it's a business as usual budget, are you also saying it's unremarkable?
It is unremarkable.
Which means that it's a normal budget that you would expect on a good year.
It's a normal budget that I would expect from a country which isn't trying to make any dramatic change.
And there is no central vision.
Well, unless you say that the current vision, whatever it may be, is the vision that is being pursued.
But when you say the current vision, whatever it may be, that suggests the current vision is not terribly clear.
Well, this is the point, Karan. Since the last budget was framed, much has happened. And the context in which the country is at the moment is really quite different. And I really saw nothing which addresses that particular set of issues. I mean, for instance, the whole President Trump's tantrums. At the point when the budget was being framed, we may have had expectations about the Indo-US trade agreement, but it wasn't there. And the chances of it being there were looking dimmer and dimmer. One would have expected the budget to have at least taken cognizance of that, tried to figure out what kind of effects it may have, and to counter those. Some of it has been done, but those are minor. And the Indo-EU FTA is a major landmark, and that was very much on the cards. It's going to have implications for the Indian economy.
And you're suggesting that even the Indo-EU FTA is not adequately reflected in this budget?
There's no reflection that I could spot.
So neither the Indo-EU FTA, which is, as you said, a major landmark, nor the failure to get a trade deal with America until President Trump surprised everyone with his announcement last night.
We still don't know yet.
We
He
don't
has
have any
surprised
details.
us.
We
That's
don't have
right.
any details.
That's right.
But neither of them are reflected adequately in the budget.
Not at all. No, it doesn't even have to be adequately reflected, but at least a sense of what could be the potential implications.
And that's not there.
That I could not find.
I'll come to what you're talking about in a fairly major way in a moment's time, because what we're addressing is the extent to which the budget tackles the problems the Indian economy was facing or the challenges it's facing. But what you're suggesting also, and I'll make this the prior question, is that although the budget is framed by the three kartavyas that the finance minister set out in her preamble part of the speech, those are not, how should I put it, major systemic change and reform. Those are simply signs of continuity as we've been functioning over the last few years.
Yes, these are not three new kartavyas.
These are old ones.
These are all old ones. They've been around.
And therefore, they can't be the harbingers of systemic change and reform.
Well, if you take the term kartavya, it does not necessarily mean change.
No, it just means
It's
responsibility.
responsibility. And the responsibilities of government have not changed in the last 70 years.
Then let's take up the responsibilities of government one by one, because that's one way of talking about the extent to which this budget adequately caters to the challenges the economy faces. I'll come to President Trump in a moment time, but let me begin a little differently. Many people would say one of the biggest challenges the economy faces is that private sector investment has been stagnating for some 5 or 6 years. FDI is declining, and foreign institutional investors are pulling out their money in sizable sums. To what extent has she tackled this concern?
Not at all. And these are essentially, the ones you pointed out, Karan, are really indicators of one thing and one thing only, which is that the investor community at large, whether in India or abroad, seems to have kind of lost faith in the India story. And the question is why? So first we need to have an answer to the why before we start to do something about it. Now, if you look at what has happened in the recent past, the government has recognized this problem. And the big push towards public investment that took place particularly last year was a way of addressing this issue. The assumption being that there would be a crowding in effect, so government investments happen, infrastructure gets improved, private investment starts flowing in.
But that didn't happen.
It hasn't happened. The question then that has to be asked, and as you rightly said, this has been around for at least 5-6 years, if not longer, this problem. We've been hanging around that 28 to 32% investment to GDP ratio. The problem, I think, is far more deep-rooted. At one time, one thought one of the reasons for this was the overzealousness of our enforcement agencies. But in the last year or so, that also hasn't happened very much. It's not to the extent it was happening before. So what is going on? Why is there this lack of confidence?
And that why question the government isn't asking.
Doesn't seem to be asking, or at least if it is asked itself, it's not telling us.
This is a fairly serious problem, the fact that investment is stagnating. And if the government is not asking the question why, it can't tackle the problem either. And does that suggest a certain irresponsibility?
No, perhaps not irresponsibility. Perhaps they don't like the answer that they would get to that question.
So avoidance.
Avoid.
It's a sort of head in the sand ostrich approach. I don't like the problem, so I'm not going to recognize it.
Or it may redound negatively on me.
Now, clearly, once again, the finance minister is hoping that the capex she's announced of 12.2 lakh crore, 4.4% of GDP, will crowd in investment. It didn't do it last year.
No.
She's hoping it will do it this year. But you, I believe, have serious reservations about that 12.2 lakh crore figure. You believe some of it may not actually be capex at all.
Well, that depends on what the states do. The difference between last year and this year's budget is that a lot more responsibility is being put on the states.
Because this is going as interest-free loans to the states.
That's right.
And the whole thing hinges on whether states use it for capex purposes or other purposes.
Well, now here's the thing, that from what I gathered from the speech, one hasn't seen the detail, the states would be required to spend it on capex. They can't use it for non-capex purposes.
Does that mean that all of the 12.2 lakh crore will translate into capex, either at the hands of the central government or in the hands of state governments, or is there still some measure of doubt?
No, it probably will. But the question is that who gets the credit or the blame? So look at what's happening. The central government is giving an interest-free loan. So in the central government budgeting, that's going to be shown as capex. The states, they're getting it as a loan, so it's financing of a deficit. If they spend it on capex, it'll show up as capex.
And if they don't?
They don't. We don't know. Remember, the states have a flexibility. They can take this money and spend it on capex, which they would have otherwise done with their own resources. And they can divert those resources to current expenditures.
But it's possible the states
There's
may not take
fungibility.
this loan at all.
It depends. It depends upon what the conditions are.
So there remain some doubts about whether all of 12.2 lakh crore will be capex.
Yes.
So I am right in saying you do have reservations about that figure.
Absolutely. And the reason I always have a doubt about this is because of fungibility. At the end of the day, the states have their own interests. They have their own objectives. And they will pursue it. So if the center is giving funds for a very specific purpose which they cannot wriggle out of, what they will do is simply reduce the amount that they would spend of their own funds on that activity.
Absolutely.
So net, you're
Back to where you were.
you're back to where you were.
Now, the second problem facing the economy, and again, it was a challenge for the finance minister, is the need to create more jobs. The Prime Minister, in his statement immediately after the budget was delivered, said that the budget has given what he called a bada boost to job creation. Has it?
I haven't been able to locate it.
You can't see the bada boost.
Not really, no. Look, there is one sort of redeeming feature, that this budget has recognized the importance of the MSME sector. Although I think the amount that has been allocated is 10,000 crores, which is neither here nor there. The government doesn't have any direct method of boosting employment. What the government can do is to encourage economic activity. And the MSMEs are possibly the best way of actually generating employment in the country. If you recall last time, a couple of years ago, they tried to get all of these sort of corporate-oriented employment. So you had the apprenticeship and all sorts of things. There was the
internship program.
There's the internship program. There was an employment-linked incentive of some variety that was given. So all sorts of things were done. All targeted at corporates, all of which came to nothing. In fact, the money's not been spent.
95% hasn't been spent.
This is correct. So now, at least they've recognized the importance of the MSMEs. The question again is that how is it going to be implemented?
That's the big question.
That really is the big question mark.
And you do believe that the Prime Minister's claim that a bada boost has been given to job creation is simply not the case?
No, well, firstly, bada is, I think, overstating it. There could be a boost.
But not bada.
10,000 crores, frankly. isn't that much.
What about the focus on areas like tourism, textiles, leather, areas like the 40,000 crore semiconductor mission or the stress on electronics? Will that create jobs for the youth?
Electronics does not create jobs. Let's be very clear. Electronics is two kinds. One, of course, is that when you're just doing assembly work, which does create jobs, and we're already doing it. And that's what the cell phone manufacturing, all of that stuff is. But when you're talking about building up the hardware, those are some of the most capital-intensive activities.
So the Prime Minister's belief that these areas will create jobs for what he called yuva, youth, is once again mistaken.
It will create jobs for certain kind of youth, but these would be the most highly trained. And that's not where our problem lies.
So the most highly trained will go into semiconductors or
Yes.
into electronics. What about areas like tourism, textiles, and leather? Will that create jobs?
Yes, but again, those are precisely the sectors that have been hit,
Particularly by Trump's tariffs.
particularly by Trump's tariffs.
And that's where the budget's
which
lack
is-
of reflection of the problem is a handicap.
And so, sort of implementing a supply side measure to address what is essentially a demand side problem
Is a mismatch.
is a bit of a mismatch.
In this context, let me take up the point you made a little earlier. Last year, the budget allocated 10,800 crore for the Prime Minister's internship program.
Yes,
It transpires that 526 crore is all that's been spent.
that's correct.
In other words, 95% plus of the allocation was simply not used. This year, as a result, the allocation has been slashed to just 4,800 crore. Doesn't that suggest that the government has a problem executing its policies and spending money?
Karan, if my memory serves me right, we discussed this last year in our post-budget.
Will the money be spent?
Will the money be spent? And I said it's not going to happen.
And it didn't.
No, and it wasn't going to happen because corporates are not going to burden themselves with a whole bunch of people for whom they have no work. This was a non-starter to begin with. And what the last year's experience has showed is that our apprehensions were not ill-founded.
This suggests that two critical problems facing the economy have been inadequately, if at all, addressed by the budget. One, private sector investment stagnating. Two, the need to create jobs.
Yes. On the job front, I said the MSME story. Let us see what happens. We don't know the details yet, how it's going to get implemented.
But you do believe the MSME story, which is critically based upon this 10,000 crore MSE growth fund, is a little, but it's not a major step.
Well, yes. Again, when you have make things like growth funds, one wants to really know how you're going to operationalize it. Because we have a habit of creating things like growth funds and then tying it up in so much red tape that nothing happens.
And that could happen here.
I am afraid so.
So this 10,000 crore might actually end up being only partially spent.
Yes. So if you think about it, in the MSME sector, you have MSMEs which exist and you can help them grow. For that lot, you can simply work through the banking system. Banking system is perfectly capable of handling that. The real issue is that if you want new MSMEs to come in, particularly the micro and small enterprises, the banking sector does not want to touch that. That's where you need government-driven initiatives. So the government is actually taking the risk. So in a sense, the government is playing the role of venture capital.
Will this be played effectively in this
Now,
case?
this is the question. If you have a bunch of bureaucrats, and I've been a bureaucrat all my life, if you put me in charge of this, I will tie it up in so many knots, it's not going to work.
So we have a
So you need a venture capital approach, a mindset.
So you've got a reasonably good initiative on paper, which could be thwarted by the sort of people who are responsible for executing it.
Or just the design.
Or just the very
Or
design.
just the very design itself can.
Which is why this 10,000 crore is a potentially good step, but it's not going to yield the results we want.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed.
But keeping our fingers crossed is another way of saying we're hoping against hope.
Yes.
And then, of course, the fourth challenge the economy faces, one that we've discussed already, the challenge of Trump's tariffs. Until he reduced them yesterday night, and we still don't have the details, so we don't know actually in what way they've been reduced. But the reports suggest that 50% has come down to 18%. The reciprocal tariffs has come down from 25 to 18, and according to at least a couple of papers, the penalty for buying Russian oil has been removed altogether, but that's not confirmed because it's not attributable to any one individual. It's simply unquoted, unnamed sources telling the Indian Express and similarly telling the Economic Times. But until all of that happened, the budget did not adequately reflect the challenge our exports face.
No, in any case, I think even with this trade deal, Mr. Trump's track record is such that you cannot really believe that the details of this deal will remain for the next several years. Now, do you take these deals at face value and work with it? Or do you take it with a certain amount of expectations that they may be volatile, as it were? Mr. Trump may change his mind tomorrow. I would err on the side of caution. I would be saying that, look, we've got this deal with the US, all very well, but we still, given what we are facing, we still need to continue with what we had started with, which was, number one, to diversify geographically. Number two, to focus on internal sources of growth.
Until the deal was announced last night, we had no hope that the deal would be announced anywhere soon.
This is correct.
And therefore, that was a challenge looming over the head of the finance minister.
In any case.
And for her not to adequately tackle it is once again, how should I put it, burying your head in the sand. I'm not using...
Yeah, unless she had information that we do not, which she very well may.
Okay, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's come to some of the sectors where the budget has focused considerable attention. And I want to ask you, how meaningful is that attention? How meaningful are those sectors? First, there are the 7 high-speed rail corridors, the 20 national waterways, the focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. In your eyes, how significant is all of that?
Focus on Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, very significant. But again, let's provided that you do it right and not play politics with it.
Which is a big question.
Which is a big question, as always is in these cases. The other two, I think, are more cosmetic than anything else. You know, waterways is something we've been talking about for donkey's years, Karan.
So it's an old idea.
It's a very old idea. You know, in India, traditionally, before the railways came in, the waterways were our main lifelines. The British destroyed the waterway system deliberately. This is history. And we've been talking about bringing the waterways back. And there have been efforts in the past, never amounted to very much. So I don't know how far they're going to get with this. I suppose hope springs eternal.
What about the high-speed 7 rail corridors?
For what purpose?
Freight, presumably, and traffic.
You didn't need those. We do need to strengthen the rail system. So if you think about the railways, I don't think there is any question that the railways need investments. The question is this the investment that they need?
And you're saying this is not?
I'm not sure.
You're saying this is unnecessary.
I'm not sure what difference it's going to make substantively. There will be a time contraction, yes. But are these the corridors you want? Are these the kind of linkages that we are talking about? The railways have always had game plans.
But you raised a fundamental issue. You're actually saying, has she committed herself to something that wasn't really necessary? And that may not be
At this point in
as useful as she
time.
believes.
At this point in time.
At this point in
At
time.
this point of time.
The finance minister has also given a 21-year tax holiday to foreign companies that set up data centers in India. And writing in yesterday's Economic Times, Swaminathan Iyer raises a question, and I'd like to put that question to you. He says, is this really needed when MNCs such as Microsoft, Amazon, and Google have already declared their intention to invest a whopping $67.5 billion in data centers and supporting infrastructure? What's your answer to his question?
Look, there are two things. One is having these large companies coming in, which is what Swami is saying. But they are going to be collecting the data for their purposes. The question is, are we going to create data centers for our own internal development of AI? Number one. But there's a more fundamental issue. And that issue is data centers are enormous users of electricity,
Which we don't have in surplus.
which we certainly don't have in surplus. Are we getting into a situation where, over the shorter period, before you can come up with new power plants, and I don't know where those power plants are going to come up, nothing seemed to be really talked about it. Are we going to run into a situation where we face dramatic shortages of electricity?
You mean, has she been beguiled by the idea of data centers and not asked herself the question, have we got the backup electricity necessary for them?
Perhaps. I do not know. That's what her advisors are for.
We could get caught in a trap.
We could. Because these data centers are not going to come up unless you guarantee them electricity.
Now, an area where she has responded to the geopolitical circumstances India faces, she didn't as far as trade is concerned, but where she has responded is in the area of defense. The capital outlay for defense has gone up by 21%.
Yes.
What will be the multiplier impact of that on the rest of the economy?
I don't really know. I would imagine it would be higher than it would have been earlier, because we have started creating capacity within the country, particularly on the missiles program. So, but I think this increase in defense expenditure was necessary, because the kind of threats that we face and the kind of warfare that seems to be emerging in the future, we are still not really prepared for it. I think we need to strengthen our capabilities far more strong.
In other words, don't look for the multiplier impact of this. Defense is a requirement that has to be
Which
met,
has
full
to be
stop.
met, yes. But I suspect there will be a multiplier effect because of our fairly advanced missiles program.
And could it be a source of creation of jobs as well?
I doubt it. These are again capital intensive.
Now, there was a section of the budget which seemed to be littered with a whole lot of little changes in taxation, in revenue, in excise, in customs. TCS on foreign remittances has been, for example, reduced. MAT has been rationalized. A whole lot of processes have been simplified. Penalty procedures have been decriminalized. The question is, how many people will this benefit? And will it create a good feel factor that will boost consumption?
Again, the important one out here is the decriminalization. That was one of the most egregious elements of our policy. What is otherwise should have been a civil case had been criminalized. And I suspect a lot of the kind of lack of confidence that we've been talking about as far as
Is because of
investment
that.
could have been because of that.
So this could release investment.
It could potentially, but one again needs to see what is it that they're decriminalizing.
The devil lies in the details.
Devil lies in the details, yes.
But the number of people it will benefit are the tax-paying middle class.
No, and the larger, the entrepreneurs. So it's not just income tax.
One area which I got the feeling didn't get the mention it deserves beyond coconuts, cashew, and cocoa is agriculture. Should she have spent more time on agriculture?
Absolutely. I found it quite shocking that agriculture was almost entirely missing.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I mean, is it that the feeling now is Indian agriculture is doing so well, we are now a surplus producing country, we don't need to worry about agriculture? Well, don't worry about agriculture per se, but worry about the farmer.
And pretty close to 60% of the population lives in the rural countryside.
Yeah.
Many of whom are dependent upon agriculture.
That's right.
And that's where jobs need to be created.
That's where non-farming jobs need to be created.
But she's done nothing about that.
This is the point, that agriculture as a production sector may not need the kind of focus because we are now surplus producing. But agriculture as a source of employment and the state of farmers in India
Remains critical.
remains not just critical, remains not very pleasant.
Let me then use that word irresponsibility this time around. Was it irresponsible not to spend more time and effort on agriculture?
Not on agriculture per se, but agriculture as a part of the rural economy, yes.
It was irresponsible to downplay it.
Yes.
You're using the word irresponsible.
Yes.
But coming to the end of this interview, one of the things I noticed from the pink papers in particular is that she got a lot of praise for achieving her fiscal deficit target of 4.4%. But for next year, she's only fractionally reduced it to 4.3%. Given that she believes she's going to have 7% growth, should she have been more ambitious with the fiscal deficit target for next year?
Well, let's look at what happened for this year. She's achieved the fiscal deficit target and everybody is giving her kudos for it, despite the fact that we've had such low inflation that the tax collections tanked.
But she's cut expenditure across the board.
But she's cut expenditure, and particularly cut expenditure which benefited the states. So what she did in effect was get her target, fiscal deficit target, essentially by shifting the bulk of the adjustment onto the state governments. And now you can start pointing fingers at them and saying that they are not doing their job.
So in a sense, it's good that she hasn't set a more ambitious fiscal deficit target for next year, because she might well have been doing the same thing next year as well.
That's right.
The problem is that revenue isn't growing.
Well, no, the revenue growth is consistent with the nominal GDP growth figures. It's not inconsistent. So if I have a situation where my inflation, which had been assumed to be 4.5%, comes in at 0.5%, it's going to show up in my revenues because they're all ad valorem. So there's consistency there. Now, for the next year, for the coming year, the assumption has been a 10% nominal growth.
Which presumably means...
Which means 3.5% inflation. So, yeah.
Of course, people question whether inflation actually is 0.5%.
I question it.
And people also question whether growth is 7%. Maybe they say, as the Wire article by M.K. Venu this morning suggests, and as the former Nobel laureate has suggested, growth may be considerably lower than what we're claiming it to be.
Yes. You see, this is the thing. The way we compute the GDP today, the GDP at current prices, the so-called nominal GDP, is the one that we measure most accurately. The GDP at constant prices, real GDP, depends upon the price index that you're using.
And if the
price index is wrong, you're going to get kind of messy results.
which is why there's this big question mark, are we really growing at 6?
This is right. And the question mark is, do we really have 0.5% inflation?
This is a very important issue you've touched upon, because I noticed that the finance minister's first kartavya was to accelerate growth.
Yes.
And we're now questioning whether the way we measure GDP is actually accurate or not. What level of GDP growth do you expect or anticipate next year as a result of the budget she's given us?
It's difficult to say, but she has taken 10%, which is not an unreasonable target
For nominal growth.
for nominal growth.
The question is, what will inflation be?
What will inflation be?
Or what will it be deemed to be?
Well, no, it's a measurement issue, and that we are getting a completely new price series coming up any day now. When that comes up, we don't know what's going to happen. There are all kinds of guesses. We know that the share of agriculture is going to come down and so on. But, and in CPI, share of food is coming down dramatically. So we know some of those, but we don't know what the numbers are going to turn out to be.
If she does achieve 10% nominal growth, what do you believe the inflation is likely to be?
Probably around 3.5–4%.
So she could get growth of real GDP growth of 6.5%.
Yes.
7%?
Maybe, but I doubt it. I think the Trump effect, the turmoil that the world is going through in terms of uncertainty, I think is going to play out this year. It didn't play out last year.
So 7 is questionable. 6.5
reasonable.
is reasonable.
Yeah.
Which means we are well short of the 8% for 20 years that we need to take us to Viksit Bharat.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that target of achieving Viksit Bharat in 21 years' time by 2047 is getting further and further away.
Well, or you can reduce what you define as Viksit.
That's another way of doing
it.
If you can't achieve it, change the goal.
Absolutely.
On that note of humor when you're smiling, thank you very much indeed, Professor Sen, for this interview.
It was a pleasure.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.